Good morning, everyone. And I've been meaning to make a video about this for a little bit now. Not really just about one thing, but honestly, it's been a question that has kind of stuck with me for a long time. It's just a lingering question. Um, well, it's a few questions. Not just it's gonna be a long one, maybe 20 or so minutes, but I'll try and keep this short and brief. Um, this is going to be a voiceover. It's gonna be my first time making one, and to supplement you guys with not having to see nothing, I am finally going to try out um, my Samsung USB thing that I bought like a few weeks ago and barely ever used. But now I'm gonna use it. It's pretty cool actually. But yeah, I'm using it to kind of record Dark Tide. You know, it's a game that I really like recently, and I tried recording Left 4 Dead, but honestly, Left 4 Dead right now for me, it just runs really really bad. I mean, of course, it's gonna run bad for me because I have a shitty office computer. But let's get to the main point here. So the title for this video is "What Life Means to Me," and that is the question. What does life mean to me? Um, I've been thinking a lot lately about what life actually means to me. Um, Not trying to say it in a fake, deep kind of way, but because life for me, just in general, life can be for a lot of people really heavy to deal with. For me, it was no different. It was pretty hard with its own set of trials and tribulations. And I do think a lot of people are just trying to get through the day, and not enough people really talk about it. Not enough people really express themselves on how difficult their own life can be, on how sometimes curveballs just get thrown at you from out of nowhere, and it just knocks you down, or it can just be from culmination of your whole life in general. um but the main point I want to make here is that life is never some perfect inspirational thing. you know it's not Life isn't meant to be the classic American dream, of being able to live and prosper and live to grow free in a easy world. you know Life sometimes to me is just surviving the day, and you try again tomorrow. You try again, and you try harder each time. you know it's like BoJack. I don't know if you guys have seen BoJack, but it gets easier, but you gotta do it every day. That's the hard part, but it does get easier. That's a pretty good quote right there. Because it really sticks with people on how life can sometimes suck, but you get through it, and every day life for you will get easier. But the hard part is you got to put in the work, but it will get easier for you over time. And life isn't always fair. Some people grow up with stability, support, and time to figure themselves out. And while you should appreciate everything you have, while you should cherish and care for the things you do have, some people, you know, they live in environments where they have to grow up faster. Whether that could be from, there's multiple variables, but the point I'm trying to make here is some people can have an easy life, and they have the time to be able to figure themselves out. They don't have bootstraps to pull themselves up by. But some people like me, we have to kind of make our own luck. We have to be able to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. No one else is there to help us. And hopefully for many of you, you guys had support. um some people are born having the ability to not work at all. you know I, however, have to work to, pay rent. Obviously, I have to pay for school. Basically, I gotta be a responsible, person. I gotta pay for cats. Taking care of all the cats ain't easy, but I love them to death, and that's why I do it because I love them. And if any of them were to pass, it's just like losing something really close to me. It's really difficult, but I have to take care of my cats, myself, and a lot of times I have to take care of my other family members. Like my own brother or my two sisters. And while sometimes I'm able to help them out, it's not always easy, because where I work, I don't even get paid. I don't get paid a lot, and I'm not saying that as like, oh, well, the job is shitty, so I should work somewhere else. Like, no, it's, how do I put this? I can make money, it's a job, it's a nice job. I don't have to work extremely hard, but it's mine. And my brother, at the time, he was still making way more than me. Um, my sister was making more than me. My younger sister, she, well, she had made some choices that weren't, good, and she she kind of separated herself from the family, so she's in Arizona with her own boyfriend, and my family's trying to get her to come back, but some things aren't working out so far. But I hope she can come back. But that's not really the main point. But the point I want to make is that I have to sometimes give, and giving to me is something that is very difficult for people to understand. My whole life, I I really tried to be someone that people can depend on, and my grandma, she's a paragon of light. She's honestly like the greatest person I know, because she was never selfish. She always thought about other people, about what they need, about their wants, about how they're doing, about their lives, about taking care of her family that was just dumped on her like this, Like, when I was a baby, my mother had left me and my siblings with my grandmother, and then she just left. She left. She walked out on us. My father at the time, while he wasn't the smartest man, he was there up until um I was 5. No, not 5. Until I was 3, and my mother, she came back, and my own father and my mother, they got addicted to drugs, and it's not an easy topic, but they had to gotten addicted to multiple substances. Some things you cannot say here on YouTube, but they got addicted to powder, crystal, spoons, you know, ganja, whatever you want to call it, but it was difficult having to grow up with that, because that drugs never improve anyone, and it's worse when you have a family, because if you were a kid like me and you had to deal with drug addict parents, they would, abuse you or burn cigarettes on you, or you know, start arguments for no reason with your mother, and my father would argue back, and then my mother would call the cops, and then my father would run away, and he'd take me with him, and he'd have me sleep at like these crack dens, I guess you could say, and that's where I'd sleep for the night until I'd come back the next day at my grandmother's. It's worse when you were living on the side of town that I did. There was a high volume of gang violence. You know, Um, and our house would get shot at, and it's not something to joke about either. That's why I'm trying to stress that none of what I'm saying right now is false. You know, I just want to kind of tell you guys that right now. The subjects I'm covering are nothing to joke about. And so I'm not going to joke about anything. I'm going to take this very seriously, and I'm going to tell you guys the entire truth. Because that's what the viewers and you guys deserve. It's the truth and nothing but. But I kind of went off on a rant there. But, it sucks, Life really sucks for some people. I'm trying to pay for school. I'm trying to get my car and my license, and that's already hard enough when you don't have anyone to help you or to guide you through the steps on how to get a license. I completed my this course you have to do. It was more my education thing, but you have to take another test, after, and then you can go down the DMV, you take a driving test, and then bam, you get your license in a few days or weeks. But it's hard enough learning how to drive when the only person who could teach you how to drive is busy all the time with their work schedule, and my work schedule conflicts with theirs, and so it makes little time for us to for him to teach me. But throughout my whole life I had to become responsible. As a kid, my siblings couldn't cook for shit. you know my sister and I were the only ones who really knew how to cook anything, because we saw our grandmother cooking all the time. She went out of her way to teach us. And then I slowly taught myself how to cook, you know? And that's what got me into culinary, was just being able to cook things for people who you care for, Things that people can enjoy and that you enjoy seeing them eat, But some people, they get to enjoy life, early. They get so much more than you could ever dream of. Some people have to fight, sometimes tooth and nail just to feel normal, just to feel like they have some sense of stability, or just on this line, just a line of just normal shit. And, a lot of things can happen to you. You could lose people. I've lost people before, whether it be, family members, or, you're losing friends, whether it's because of something you did in your past, or this, repeating behavior that you're never going to be proud of, or if it's, the slow drifting apart of people, or if it's, being judged and feeling like your own identity, was tied to people who are no longer in your life. Losing people in general can make you feel, what's the word I'm looking for? It can make you feel like you're trying to find yourself, questioning who you are. Because if your identity is just one group, or if it's one person, or if it's one family member, if your identity is just, anchored by one thing, when you lose it, you're trying to find your own identity. And it's really hard, man. It's hard. And seeing old friends or old family happy can hurt. It can really hurt. Even if you don't want to feel bitter, or if you don't want to feel bad for seeing them be happy, you just have to kind of learn from them. When people leave, it can feel like they took a version of you with them, It took a version of you that should never have existed, I've made mistakes before. I'm not denying that I was anything, an angel. I never was an angel or some kind of paragon of truth. I'm not a pariah, but I repeated behavior I was never proud of before in my past, and I'm taking accountability for it now. You know, I'm regretting my own past behavior and I'm trying to become a better person deep down. I've made decisions I'm not proud of again and again. I always didn't intend to hurt people that I never meant to hurt people without, meaning to. I've uh, hurt people without meaning to, is what I'm trying to say. But I don't think a person should be trapped forever as the worst person of themselves. Like, sorry. A person should never be trapped forever as the worst version of themselves. You know? Accountability matters, but shame can make you feel like you're not allowed to grow, Or if it's just nothing, just ghosting, if it's just completely nothing. It sucks, but here we are. I'm still alive. I'm still here. I've been through some crazy shit these past couple of weeks, dealing with my own identity. You know, life means learning how to own your mistakes without letting them become your intended, without becoming your entire identity. Your whole life is just made up of moments that you can either cherish or regret. And if you spend your time focusing too much on what you regret, then that becomes your entire identity, which you shouldn't do. And losing people is sometimes mortifying, deep down. It can make people act or feel like they're just a numb, like it's nothing really. Sometimes you just don't react how you think you should, or sometimes you laugh or you go quiet or feel nothing because your brain doesn't know how to, or like how to feel, and that doesn't mean you don't really care. It just means that you never had a chance to feel these things, because if you have a life that you've experienced a lot of grief and a lot of trauma, then sometimes you just become more and more numb to it, you know? Being human is messy. It's sometimes unorganized mess. But pain doesn't always look the way people expect it to. And I myself had trouble with dealing with everything that's been going on with me recently, and I had tried to off myself. It's really uncomfortable to talk about, and it's not anything to joke about either. But it's the truth. I tried to take my own life, and thank God I didn't. It made me realize that I was spending too much time focusing on what could have been instead of looking forward and trying to just grow as a person. And it's hard. It's really, really hard. But you know what? Small things that keep you going are sometimes worth more than the big moments. If it's something small like feeding your cat, your dog, your hamster, or if it's picking up an old hobby that you haven't tried out in years, if it's trying out something new, if it's going outside, if it's being able to go out and do something and be your own person, if you're able to just be able to make something of yourself, if you're able to grow financially, if you have, a bit of more money in your pocket, or if you try and work on yourself physically and mentally, you know, and like myself, I'm trying out, my protein and my creatine stuff, in hopes to try and improve myself physically, or if it's, talking to people who can still see the good in you, you know, who can still see you as a person, or if it's for wanting a better future for yourself, or maybe sometimes for others. Life is not always saved by one huge miracle. Sometimes it's saved by the small reasons to keep going. You know, what life means to me now is life means change, changing for the better. Hopefully, it's changing for the better. Life is changing better as a person. It's growing, it's growth. Life means pain, but also chances to learn on pain, to not let that become your life. Life means becoming your own person outside of other people's opinions or, views on you. Life means continuing even when you don't know how things will turn out. Maybe things won't turn out good for me. Maybe things will get worse over time for me. Maybe I'll lose everything. Maybe I could die tomorrow, or my brother could die tomorrow, or my grandparents could die tomorrow. It's it's the worst thing that can happen. But these things can all help to grow as a person, you know? And I hope none of you will have to experience loss like that, you know? I never want anyone to kind of go through the things I've had to go through. I don't have everything figured out. I don't. I never pretended to. I never pretended that I was anything. I I know I don't want my past, my own mistakes, or other people's opinions to be the only thing that defines me. You know, but my message to you guys is: if you're going through something and you feel behind, I get it. If you're lost people, I get it. If you're ashamed of who you used to be, I understand. There are some people who can't change. Like actual pedophiles, like Nova or the guy I covered. You know, those are people who can't change because they did the worst thing imaginable, which is talking to minors, trying to groom them, and sexually talking to them in such horrible ways, or showing them pictures of their dick. It's awful, and these things happen all the time to everyone. Not everyone, just just the gross, disgusting monsters who do that shit, like Nova or fuck even Andy. Now, have you guys heard about that shit on his YouTube posts? Or Jupiter or Cyrax. These people are real. And who knows how many people are out there doing the same shit that no one knows about. But you're still here. You, the viewer, are still here. And that means your story is not finished. You could still build a life even after losing people, making mistakes, or, you're feeling broken. And that is what life means to me right now. It's not always happiness. Sometimes it's honestly just trying your best. But trying still matters. Trying still matters exponentially. Small wins eventually add up to big wins. And maybe you trying is enough for today, you know? I used to think life was something that's supposed to feel like, you're always moving forward. But, lately I realized sometimes life is just trying not to give up on yourself, you know? But I want you guys to know that I care, right? And I still care. I never stopped caring for you, for the viewers, or for you guys. And one day things can change for the better, or more rarely for the worse. But let's just hope that never happens, huh? I hope that this video may have helped someone in some small, minuscule way, but I hope it helped. And the Dark Tide video probably already ended. It's 20 minutes long, and this video is 25 minutes long. But I'll put in something for you guys, so you guys don't have to sit through your black screen for the rest of the video. But I want you guys to know that I care about you guys. You know, and that sometimes, sometimes trying is trying, but you're trying. It sounds kind of fucking stupid. it's true.